All right, guys, back with Mr. Driscoll, Texas Park and Wildlife Fisheries Biologist. This is part 6 to our videos on the update on the track and studies at Toledo Bend. So Todd's got some more good data for us here, one of which is catching them off the bank versus catching them offshore, right?
Yeah, and again, anybody familiar with Toledo Bend? I mean, I've always referred to Toledo Bend as just a lake that just doesn't, shoreline fish very well, right? I mean, if you're just an old school guy that just wants to beat the bank, I mean, Toledo Bend just has enough offshore ridges and shallow water and structure that most of those fish just get off the bank. And our study showed just that. We defined shoreline oriented as being within 30 feet of the shore. I know I'm earning my keep when I run your batteries down.
Do what?
I know I'm earning my keep when I run your batteries down.
Absolutely. There'll be a little something extra in your paycheck.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now I expect a bonus for this round.
Let's see if that gives me power. Okay, I'm good.
Okay.
All right, start right back where you are, and I'll just edit it together.
Yeah, so a lot of anglers familiar with Toledo, I think, will agree with some of this, shoreline related stuff. Toledo Bend, outside of the spring spawn, when fish are just on the banks pretty heavily, it's just not a lake that just, going over there and fishing, bank beating is going to do you a whole lot of good. There's just so much offshore cover, woody debris, ridges, things of that nature. And our study proves just that. You put all the observations together, 78% of the time our bass were offshore. And that means they were farther than 30 feet off the shoreline. I don't think that'd really surprise anybody. And neither will the springtime measurement. Seasonally, that was obviously highest on the shoreline, but even then it was only 43%. A lot of those fish were still far enough off the bank spawning that they weren't classified as shoreline 30 feet or less. So I don't think that surprises anyone there. Now this here really to me is one of the more eye-opening pieces of data we have overall. What type of structure did our fish use or tracked fish? Although we did on a rare occasion find that bass will get out in the middle of nowhere relative to water depths, that only happens very rarely. It seems that in other ways, though, bass at Toledo Bend are commonly in areas that are probably going to get very little to no fishing pressure. When we found these fish, I used 6 different classifications for structure. And that included points, drops, drains, flats, creek channels, and channel swings.
Okay.
Those 6. Overall, when you pool all of our observations together, fish were, I would say, randomly scattered over flats 41% of the time. That was just mind-blowing to me. By far the most common structure. I say common structure, it's really the lack of structure. All the other classifications are structured. The flats, just the random no structure. But yeah, that was the most commonly used structure by definition, was just flats. And these were fish that were most commonly at least 50 yards, but most often 100 yards or more away from the sharp breaks, the points, the drops that we all find on our electronics and go idle.
Those fish are hard to catch.
And yeah, we find fish on that structure. We sure do. But good grief. 41% of the time, our telemetered bass were not on that stuff. They were on the flats, the nothingness. That's where they were. And that's just crazy to me. And remember, the 8 or 9 pounder, that's exactly what it did. Pretty much its entire 1 year of tracking. So, I'm as guilty as anybody. I try to use all the electronics to my utmost advantage. And, I'm out there idling all the tight lines, the hard drops, the hard bottom areas, the points. The points in particular are also surprising, right? I mean, a point to most of us bass anglers just sticks out like a sore thumb. You're not going to go by a point, not idle the tip of. Most of us don't. But points, where did that rank out? Fish were on points only 10% of the time. And points ranked 5th out of the 6 of the structure classifications. Only channel swings ranked lower. and I run to a channel swing like it's nobody's business too.
Absolutely.
And you
fight
find
over
fish
them.
on channel swings, but
We fight over them. Yeah.
yeah. But for some reason, I mean, maybe it's just housing bayou channel swings fish don't like, you know. But that was just mind-boggling to me that we found what we did there in terms of the flats, the frequency the fish were, and just what so little time fish were on points or channel swings.
Golly.
So, you know, you ask me personally, how does this affect how I think about fishing? Well, that tells me that I don't spend near enough time up there on those flats, maybe idling with side imaging, marking all those magnum laydowns or big stumps.
Yeah, you're missing 40% of the fish, and you're missing the place where the most of them are found.
Yeah, I mean, again, at least our tag bass at housing, you know, bayou at Toledo. I mean, that's what these fish did. Now, you go out there and do just that. I mean, how needle in a haystack is that? I don't know, because I've still yet to really spend days doing that, right?
Well, so there's, in my video I posted today, there's this, I'm going across it's a flat, it's a point, but it's a flat point, if that makes sense. It's a big flat point. And in this case now I have Livescope and 360, and my 360 sweeps and I see two fish up there. And you'll actually see me, I stop, I got a Cloud 20 crankbait, and I wait for it to sweep back, and I get a line on it, go up there and catch one of those fish. Yeah. Somewhere I would not have fished, but I was going from one place to the next place, and I saw those fish. So yeah, this just screams to have good electronics, forward-facing electronics, where you can find that particular stuff. We talked off camera as well. I caught a 10-pounder 2 summers ago at Rayburn going across a spot, and there was a big lay down there, and I saw her in the root ball, exactly like that 9-pound fish you're talking about on Toledo.
Yeah.
She was away. She was not within 150 yards of any other cover.
Yeah. So I think very few of us spend enough time up there. That's the thing I take from that. Now that, you know, the other real important thing we haven't talked about, and that's the effects of the boat idling, the outboard motor noise on fish behavior, right? So we pool all the observations together, regardless of depth, right? This even includes fishing 3 feet and out to 30 feet. When you pool everything together, 42% of the time, boat idling over the fish caused that fish to move. But that includes very shallow observations, okay?
42%?
42% with everything pooled together. Now let's dig into that a little bit more and kind of look at like depths 10 feet or deeper or 20 feet and deeper, because they change like you would expect them to. If we only include fishing 10 feet or deeper, the fish move 25% of the time when we idle over them twice, doing a couple figure eights, you know, like most of us do idling structure. 25% of the time they moved in 10 feet of water. And then you pop that out to deeper than 20 feet, the fish moved just 20% of the time when we idled over.
Let me say that back to you to make sure. So 10 to 19 feet, they move 25% of the time?
Just deeper than 10.
Deeper than
35 feet. Deeper than 10, they move 25% of the time. If they were in deeper than 20 feet, they move 20% of the time.
So if I idle over a brush pile in 16 to 26 feet, I'm spooking at least 1 in 5 fish out of it.
That's what our study has shown. Absolutely. Now,
and back to, now, again, I'm making an assumption based upon my own history. It seems to me likely I'm spooking the biggest fish.
Could be. I mean, that makes common sense to me. We don't have the data to dig into it at that level. Now, also know that those observations exclude fish that, as we're approaching with lots, see, we drop Livescope when I'm guessing we're about 100 feet away from the fish. So we're trying to see what's going on before we even get close enough to affect its behavior. We are excluding fish from these observations that I see suspended around shad balls that are already moving on their own behavior feed.
Right. Yeah. These are stable.
That excludes those fish. So we are only looking at fish hunkered down, so to speak, right?
Yep.
Best we can tell, they are hunkered down, not moving. That's what those observations are. And that's what makes them pretty realistic. Yeah.
Interesting. You know who John Hope is. He made a comment to me back when he was tracking fish gosh, it's 25, 30 years ago now. And it always stuck with me. He said, you know, his observations were 7 pounds fish or smaller, that they acted like a deer in the woods. If something wasn't there, they're like, hey, what is that? But when they got above 7 pounds, they started acting like a tom turkey. If they saw something in the woods that wasn't right, they had no curiosity, they were leaving. And that makes me, again, that I'm interjecting my own experience and beliefs here, but I'm messing up some fish idling over them. And you know, we are all observing it more and more now with forward imaging, that you see fish move either because you caught one or because you're approaching them.
Oh, absolutely. That Livescope, the forward facing sonar, is just, you know, taught all of us that have had it for a while, all sorts of things we didn't know before. But yeah, you know, the bottom line of it is, in traditional idling depths, 20 feet or deeper, 1 out of 5 times, I mean, our study shows that we're pushing that fish and moving it off the structure.
Yeah.
And I really, honestly, 3 or 4 years ago, I mean, there's still times in practice that I'll idle everything. You know, it's just all about time and efficiency, right? Do you idle over it knowing you're going to spook some to save time, or do you just drop your trolling motor before you get there and look at it with Livescope? You're looking at with Livescope's best in terms of minimizing impacts on the behavior, but it's just more time consuming. So it's always just a give and take, right? But on tournament day, I don't ever idle those places. You know, I just don't. If I've got a milk run of deep places, I just shut off before and zip up there on the trolling motor with an 800 foot range on forward facing sonar and just stay off of it.
I know you don't have the data on this, but from remembering your observations, and I'm asking this because of side imaging, did they seem, the ones who moved, did they seem to move as you approached them or when you got over them?
When we got over, you know,
Okay.
It's really hard to pin that down.
Yep.
It really is. But, you know, if you ask me how close did we have to have it start, I mean, it's really hard to say, right? Because what we essentially did was, you know, again, that antenna is so directional when you're that close to the fish that, you know, when you're really close to it, if it moves 10 or 20 feet. But we certainly know after we do that, if a fish did not move. I mean, we know that pretty much with 100% certainty. We absolutely do. So that was one way of determining, did that fish move? You know, after we idled over it twice, even if we're a little bit unsure, we just get our bearing right back up on it and know it's just dead exactly where we had it before we got up on it.
But it suggests to me that if you are one of the guys who needs to see those fish before you catch them, you're way better off side imaging them than you are driving directly over them.
Yeah, that's just common sense. Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think, yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. And then remember, if we did the couple of figure eights right over the top of the fish and that fish did not move, then we fished for the fish to see if lure presence or potentially trolling motor noise, or on a windy day, you know, we would spot lock, you know, just a cast length away.
And do I remember every one of these, you made the presentation, 1/2 ounce sinker with a worm, right?
Yes, just for standardization, every cast, 1/2 ounce weight and a Texas rig worm. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd make 5 casts. And then we check to see if that fish is still there or not. And I don't really know what I was expecting to see, but it's somewhat surprising to me. 31% of the time when a fish was stationary idling over, after we fished for it, that fish moved. 31% of the time.
Livescope's turned on?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, what exactly is causing that fish to move is still up in the air, right? You got the lure presence, you got trolling motor noise, you got boat slap if the wind's blowing, your sonar's pinging. I mean, heck, maybe the fish just decided to move on its own. That could be.
Yep.
We just have to assume for the practical purposes of the study, when we're trying to control all the variables we can, we just assume we caused it to move in some fashion based on one of those things. And I really believe it's presence of the lure after, like you mentioned, with all the knowledge of Livescope now and seeing how fishing can affect fish, depending on their mood. I mean, I've seen a fish swim as fast as it can 15 feet away to eat an umbrella rig. And then vice versa. I've seen a fish let an umbrella rig get 10 feet from it and go the other way as fast as it can swim.
So my buddy Dickie Newberry says, if they're there, they'll show themselves. And that suggests exactly that. If that fish is up there in a feeding mood, he's going to get it. And if not, you need to be on the move. You need to be covering water and looking for the next school of fish.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah.
So,
man, and then just one more piece of data.
Yeah,
just because we could, when I got a cast length away, just 50, 60 feet away, just a standard length cast, really. If I made 5 casts and that fish hadn't moved, then I positioned the boat right on top of, like you were vertically fishing with a drop shot or a jig.
Like a drop shot, yeah.
So when we did that, only 16% of the time did that vertical fishing move it. It seemed like after we did all that idling and fishing for it from a cast length away, it seems like most of those fish were just hard-headed enough. They just weren't going to move, period. Only 16% of the time did the boat right on top of make them move when all the other stuff did.
And 409 times you fished for a fish?
We had 409 fish observations. Keep in mind, a lot of those times, fish might have been moving on their own already.
Yep.
Or we might have moved the fish idling with the outboard. So if I recall, that's close to 200 fishing observations around there.
And how many you got? You caught 3 of them?
I caught 3.
How many of those 3 were on the first cast?
They were all on the first or second cast. I do know that.
If they're there, they'll eat it.
That's right. And I have always believed that myself.
I have too.
And that's why, to a fault, I'm a guy that runs around with his head cut off in fishing places for 5 or 10 minutes at a time and gone. And I may come back and fish that 4 or 5 different times in a day, but I don't sit in one spot very often. And I know at times maybe that can hurt you, but I think more days it will help you more than it'll hurt you.
My belief has always been, if you're going to sit on a spot, you need to be tied up or anchored. You need to be sitting there quiet where they'll come to you. But that's just my personal belief.
Yeah, that makes some sense.
So you have basically proved some stuff I believe to be true and completely disproved some stuff I've always believed in fishing. Thanks, Todd. That's exactly what I needed here.
Yeah.
Golly. All right. So one last question, I think, and I don't know that you have the data to say this, but is it your sense that these bigger fish can own an area? Are they like a buck deer, or is it just they're all mixed together? And I'm back to that big fish sitting on that laydown out there.
Yeah, when I think back to all of our, and again, I would have the data to dig into this if I wanted to. All the data, let's say a fish 4+ pounds, it was very rare to see that fish in a school. And we defined a school of 5 or more bass together. It was very rare. Those fish were pretty much loners. And then when you think about the cover that we found them on, yeah, I think that's a very good point. I mean, more often than not, I think those fish are on the most ideal cover in the area. I sure do.
So now my next question is going to be and I know several of the guys who've caught the huge, let's call them 35-pound plus stringers at Rayburn in the last couple of years. I'm curious if they're catching, I think some of them are catching multiple giants together, but that would be a really curious thing to see if I can get one of them to answer to me. So I'll work on that, guys, to see if I can get Brian or Danny or Derek to answer that question. So we'll work on that, and that'll be interesting to add to this if we can get an answer.
Yeah, that sure would. But I guarantee we all know just how rare those places are that might have 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 pounders on them, right? I mean,
outside of one, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we all go out there and try to find. Obviously some people are much, much better at it than others at finding those places. And some of those names you mentioned, boy, they're the best in the business at finding them.
That's right.
Boy, those places are few and far between.
They are. And if you find one, holler at me and I'll come help you fish it.
I was going to say, if you find one, you better keep it close to the vest is what you better do.
We found one a few years ago. Unfortunately, it was right next to a boat lane. So that only lasted for one season. But that's how it happens sometimes. Todd, man, this has been fascinating. So you've got batteries in fish now that are going to last how much longer do we think? Another 3 or 4 months?
Right. Well, let's see, April, May, June timeframe, they should run out. So we're getting close to the end of the field work. And then, yeah, it'll be, the study is 75% completed right now. Much of what we talked about, is really not going to change much,
Yeah. Okay.
Don't expect it to.
Well, I appreciate your time. We all appreciate your time. I get more comments on these videos than basically anything else we do. So we'll circle back to you May, June timeframe once you've completed that and see if anything jumps out at you that's changed. And then we will all look forward to hopefully the layman's version of your report, because I don't think we'll all be able to follow the technical version, but we all look forward to seeing what you come out with.
Sounds great, Ken. I appreciate you asking me to be a part of this for sure. I enjoy it.
Been fascinating. Thanks, guys. We will be back with some more fishing. Todd, you're going to be fishing again pretty soon.
Yeah, we talked off camera. Had an email this morning. My outboard engine is en route. So, boy, it's been 2 months. I've been off the water and thinking back on it. I mean, over the last 22 years, that's the longest I've ever been not bass fished.
Wow.
So far. So I'm ready. Let's put it that way.
I did. By the way, I teased Todd the other day. I saw him go through Zavala pulling his boat with no motor on it. And I texted him. I said, dude, somebody just stole your boat and left your motor. So
you sure did. I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway. All right, Todd, thanks again. And we'll be back to you guys soon.
All right. Appreciate it.